Imagine for a moment a city shimmering under the relentless North African sun, a beacon of knowledge and power for over 300 years. This is Alexandria, the heart of an empire, a jewel carved from the legacy of Alexander the Great himself. And at its core, a queen, not just any queen, but the last of a legendary lineage, a woman whose name still echoes through the annals of time, Cleopatra VII Philippata. But don't picture her merely as the siren who captivated the mighty Romans. No, that's just the surface, the carefully crafted myth. Dig deeper with us, and you'll find a monarch of formidable intellect, a polyglot who spoke 9 languages, a strategist whose cunning rivaled any general, and a ruler who, against all odds, fought to preserve the last bastion of Egyptian independence against an unstoppable tide, the burgeoning might of Rome. Her story isn't just about love and betrayal. It's a grand, epic struggle for survival, a desperate gambit played on the world stage. We stand on the precipice of a pivotal era where the ancient world's greatest empires clashed and the fate of nations hung by a thread. And this queen, this serpent of the Nile, as her enemies would venomously call her, was at the very heart of that storm. Cleopatra inherited a kingdom teetering on the brink. Her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, was a puppet of Rome, buying his throne with gold and subservience, leaving behind a depleted treasury and a legacy of weakness. When Cleopatra ascended, first alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, then in brutal sibling rivalry, she knew one truth above all. Egypt, the ancient land of pharaohs, was a prize Rome coveted, a granary whose boundless harvests could feed legions, a treasure chest whose riches could fund empires. To survive, Egypt needed a protector, and that protector had to be Rome itself. But how do you tame the wolf that stalks your flock? You don't fight it. You invite it into your home, on your terms, or so she believed. Her first move was audacious, a stroke of genius that could only be conceived by a mind unafraid of convention. The year is 48 BCE. Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, arrives in Alexandria, ostensibly to settle a dynastic dispute between Cleopatra and her brother. But he's more than just an arbiter. He's Rome embodied, a conqueror, a force of nature. And Cleopatra, stripped of her throne by her own court, smuggled in a carpet, unrolled at his feet, emerging like a goddess. Imagine the scene, the grandeur of the Roman general, the opulent Egyptian palace, and then, this young queen, barely out of her teens, appearing as if by magic. It wasn't just an entrance, it was a declaration. This wasn't a mere seduction, it was a political calculation of the highest order. Cleopatra understood that Roman power wasn't just in its legions, but in the ambition of its leaders. Caesar represented the pinnacle of that ambition. By aligning herself with him, by becoming his lover and bearing his son, Securian, she secured Egypt's temporary reprieve. She gave Rome what it wanted: influence, resources, a foothold, but through her, ensuring Egypt's autonomy remained for a time intact. It was a partnership forged in necessity, a desperate gamble where the stakes were nothing less than the very existence of her ancient kingdom. Their alliance was profound, a union of 2 brilliant minds. Caesar, the pragmatic statesman, recognized in Cleopatra not just beauty, but intellect, a queen capable of governing, capable of understanding the grand chessboard of the Mediterranean world. She accompanied him to Rome, a dazzling exotic presence, challenging Roman norms, a living symbol of an empire that defied absorption. But the whispers grew, the fear that Caesar sought not just power, but a crown, fueled by his association with this foreign queen. And then, the daggers struck in the Senate. On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, Caesar fell, and with him, a significant pillar of Cleopatra's carefully constructed strategy. The world reeled. Rome plunged into civil war once more, a brutal contest for the legacy of Caesar, and Cleopatra, back in Alexandria, found herself in a perilous position. The child of Caesarion was now a political liability, a potential rival to any Roman who sought absolute power. Her kingdom, once again, was vulnerable. The fragile peace she had brokered was shattered. It was a moment of profound crisis, where the slightest misstep could mean the end of everything. But a queen like Cleopatra doesn't simply yield. She watches, she waits, she plans. From the ashes of Caesar's assassination, 2 new stars began to rise in the Roman firmament: Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, a cold and calculating political genius, and Mark Antony, Caesar's most loyal general, a charismatic warrior haunted by his mentor's ghost. Their paths would soon converge, and Cleopatra knew she had to choose. She had to navigate these treacherous new waters to find another protector, another champion, another gamble in her desperate fight for Egypt's soul. And so, we arrive at the second, even more famous alliance: Mark Antony, at the height of his power, summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus in 41 BCE. He expected a vassal, a supplicant queen. What he got was a spectacle. Cleopatra arrived on a gilded barge, adorned like Aphrodite, wafted by perfumed incense, rowed by silver oars to the sound of flutes. It was a display of power, wealth, and undeniable charisma. Antony, the hardened soldier, was instantly captivated, not just by her beauty, but by her sharp wit, her political acumen, her sheer force of personality. This wasn't just a love affair, though love undoubtedly played its part. This was a grand, desperate political alliance, a partnership of two powerful figures who saw in each other a path to dominance. For Antony, Cleopatra offered the unimaginable wealth of Egypt, a base of operations for his Parthian campaigns, and a connection to the legendary East. For Cleopatra, Antony was her shield, her sword, her last hope of preserving Egyptian independence against the inevitable Roman embrace. Together, they dreamed of an empire, not Roman, but Hellenistic, a new fusion of East and West, with Alexandria, not Rome, as its heart. They lived lavishly, their revelries becoming legendary, but beneath the surface of feasts and celebrations, a profound political strategy was unfolding. Cleopatra bore Antony 3 children, further cementing their bond. She advised him, supported his campaigns, and supplied his armies. She was his queen, his confidante, his intellectual equal. But every step they took, every lavish gift, every strategic alliance, was viewed with increasing suspicion and hostility back in Rome. Octavian, the meticulous, calculating rival, watched from afar, patiently building his own power, meticulously crafting a narrative against Antony, and more importantly, against the foreign queen who seemed to be seducing Rome's greatest general, away from its core values. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, had used every tool at her disposal: diplomacy, alliances, even her own body, all to protect the ancient land of Egypt. But the shadow of Rome grew longer, more ominous. The whispers in the Senate turned into shouts. The propaganda machines of Octavian painted a terrifying picture of an Eastern queen corrupting a Roman hero, aiming to dethrone Rome itself. Cleopatra's desperate gambit had bought her time, but that time was running out. The final act was about to begin, an act that would determine not just her fate, but the very trajectory of history itself. As you unravel the mysteries of the past with the unveiled past, you'll discover that even the most legendary figures often hide profound truths beneath layers of myth. And Cleopatra, the brilliant, desperate queen, is no exception. Make sure you don't miss a single revelation by hitting that subscribe button and joining our journey through history's greatest untold stories. Chapter 2: The Roman Shadow. Octavian's relentless pursuit. Imagine, if you will, the clamor of the Roman Forum, not just a marketplace, but the beating heart of an empire. Here, amidst the marble temples and bustling crowds, political narratives were forged, legends were born, and enemies were systematically dismantled. While Cleopatra and Mark Antony reveled in Alexandria, dreaming of a Hellenistic empire, another figure, cooler, more calculating, was meticulously weaving a web of political intrigue that would ultimately consume them both. This was Gaius Octavius, soon to be Octavian, the adopted son and heir of Julius Caesar, a young man whose quiet demeanor masked an ambition as vast as the Roman world itself. Octavian was no warrior poet like Antony, nor a charismatic seductress like Cleopatra. He was, above all, a master of strategy, a genius of propaganda, and a cold, relentless pragmatist. His rise to power, in the chaotic aftermath of Caesar's assassination, was a testament to his unparalleled political acumen. He understood Rome, its anxieties, its traditions, and its deep-seated prejudices. And central to his strategy was the systematic vilification of his rivals, particularly Mark Antony, and by extension, the foreign queen, who had, in the Roman narrative, ensnared him. Think for a moment about the power of a story, especially a negative one, when wielded by a political master. Octavian's propaganda machine was relentless. He painted Antony not as a Roman hero, but as a man corrupted, bewitched by the opulent Oriental world of Egypt. He was a Roman general, it was argued, who had abandoned his Roman wife Octavia, Octavian's own sister, for a foreign queen. This wasn't just a personal slight, it was an affront to Roman values, to their sense of duty, to their very identity. The narrative crafted by Octavian was potent. Cleopatra was not merely a queen, she was a sorceress, a temptress, a schemer who sought to undermine Rome from within. Her children, with Antony, the very embodiment of their alliance, were presented as a threat to Roman lineage, a dark foreign dynasty seeking to usurp legitimate Roman power. This wasn't about love or even personal ambition, it was about the survival of Rome itself, or so Octavian meticulously made the populace believe. We often look at history through the lens of grand battles, but sometimes the true war is fought in the minds of the people. Octavian understood this profoundly. He meticulously leaked stories to the Roman public, painting Antony as a drunken hedonist, lost to Eastern luxuries, while he, Octavian, presented himself as the embodiment of Roman virtue, piety, and republican ideals, despite quietly consolidating absolute power. This stark contrast was his most powerful weapon. Consider the political climate. Rome, exhausted by decades of civil war, craved stability. They longed for a return to tradition, to order, and Octavian, with his calm demeanor and his unwavering focus on Roman interests, offered exactly that. He tapped into the deep-seated Roman fear of Eastern excess, of the barbarian corrupting their noble traditions. Cleopatra, with her perceived extravagance and her undeniable foreignness, became the perfect scapegoat, the symbol of everything Rome feared and despised. Octavian's pursuit of Antony was not just about eliminating a rival, it was about solidifying his own legitimacy as Caesar's true heir. Antony, the dashing general, the loyal friend of Caesar, represented a powerful alternative vision for Rome's future, one that Octavian could not allow to stand. He needed Antony discredited, stripped of his authority, and ultimately removed from the equation. And the easiest way to do that was to tie him inextricably to Cleopatra, to paint their union as a monstrous, un-Roman aberration. Did Antony help him in this? Absolutely. His grand gestures, like the donations of Alexandria in 34 BCE, where he publicly bestowed Roman territories upon Cleopatra and their children, fueled Octavian's narrative. Imagine the outrage in Rome. A Roman general parceling out Roman lands to a foreign queen and her offspring, treating them as if they were his personal fiefdom. This was the ultimate betrayal in the eyes of many Romans, and Octavian seized upon it, transforming it into irrefutable evidence of Antony's complete subjugation to Cleopatra's will. The declaration of war, when it finally came, was ingenious. Octavian did not declare war on Antony directly, at least not initially. Instead, he declared war on Cleopatra. This maneuver allowed him to frame the conflict not as another destructive Roman civil war, but as a righteous crusade against a foreign enemy who threatened the very soul of Rome. Antony, by choosing to stand with Cleopatra, automatically became a traitor to his own people, to his own legacy. This was a psychological masterstroke. It mobilized Roman sentiment against a common enemy and isolated Antony, forcing him to choose sides, a choice that, no matter how he spun it, would be seen as a betrayal by a significant portion of the Roman elite. The stage was set for a final cataclysmic confrontation. Octavian, the quiet schemer, had meticulously built his case, sowing seeds of doubt and fear, cultivating public opinion with unparalleled skill. His pursuit was relentless, not just of Antony's legions, but of his reputation, his honor, and ultimately his very existence. Cleopatra's desperate gambit with Antony was always a high-stakes game, but she had underestimated the cold, unyielding resolve of Octavian, a man who saw not lovers but obstacles, not allies but threats. His shadow loomed large, darkening the Mediterranean, a relentless force determined to sweep away any challenge to his singular vision for Rome, an empire unified under one supreme ruler. The clash was inevitable, and its echoes would shape the world for centuries to come. Chapter 6: The Serpent's Kiss. Suicide or assassination. Imagine a world holding its breath, waiting for the grand spectacle of a queen's humiliation. Octavian, the undisputed master of Rome, was preparing his triumph, the ultimate display of his power, where Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, was destined to be dragged as his most prized captive. But history, as we often discover, has a penchant for defying expectations, for weaving narratives far more intricate and mysterious than the grand parades of victors. On August 12, 30 BCE, a chilling message reached Octavian's camp. Cleopatra was dead. But how? The official Roman narrative, the one that has permeated history for 2 millennia, speaks of a suicide by asp, a venomous cobra hidden in a basket of figs, delivered to her chambers. It's a powerful, almost romantic image, a queen choosing a dignified, albeit agonizing death over unimaginable public shame. But what if that meticulously crafted narrative masks a far darker, more convenient truth? What if the serpent's kiss was not an act of self-determination, but the cold, calculated stroke of an assassin? Let's delve into the scene, as described by ancient sources. After Antony's death, Cleopatra remained under strict Roman guard. Octavian's intent was clear. He wanted her alive, So, how could a venomous snake, notorious for its immediate and brutal effects, have been smuggled past the vigilant eyes of Roman soldiers? This is the first crack in the official story, a question that whispers through the halls of history, demanding an answer. The traditional account, championed by historians like Plutarch and Dio Cassius, paints a picture of a queen determined to die on her own terms. She had, as we explored, experimented with poisons, seeking a quick and painless end. The asp, according to the legend, was chosen for its symbolic association with royalty and divinity in Egypt, and for the perceived peacefulness of its venomous bite. Plutarch describes how, after dressing in her royal robes, she prepared herself, denying Octavian the spectacle he craved. The 2 faint marks on her arm were cited as evidence of the snake's bite, and a guard allegedly found 2 dead asps on the floor. But let us pause for a moment. Does this narrative truly stand up to the scrutiny of a critical eye? Consider the logistics. Roman guards were specifically instructed to prevent her from harming herself. Would they have been so easily fooled by a simple basket of fruit? The asp is a potent killer, but its bite is not always instantaneous or guaranteed to kill 2 people. Cleopatra's loyal attendants, Charmian and Irus, also died with her, supposedly by the same means. The idea that 2 asps were used, and that they both delivered fatal yet discreet bites, raises immediate suspicions. Now, let's explore the alternative. The terrifying possibility of assassination. Who had the most to gain from Cleopatra's death, especially a death that looked like suicide? Octavian, of course. Think about it. First, the political expediency. While Octavian wanted Cleopatra for his triumph, a live queen was a constant risk. She was intelligent, resourceful, and a master manipulator. What if she could charm her Roman guards? What if she could incite a rebellion in Egypt, even from her captivity? What if during the triumph itself, she uttered words that undermined Octavian's carefully constructed image? A dead Cleopatra, particularly one whose death could be spun as a suicide by despair, eliminated all these risks. It painted her as a tragic figure, defeated and broken, rather than a defiant prisoner plotting her next move. Second, the public narrative. A suicide by Aspe was a poetic, almost divine ending for an Egyptian queen. It served as perfect propaganda for Octavian. He could claim moral victory. She was so overwhelmed by his greatness that she chose death over facing him. This narrative absolved him of any direct responsibility for her demise, while still ensuring her removal from the political stage. It allowed him to maintain his image as a merciful victor, rather than a ruthless killer. Third, the problem of Caesarion. Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar was a direct threat to Octavian's claim as Caesar's sole legitimate heir. While Octavian initially feigned mercy towards Caesarion, he eventually had him executed. Cleopatra alive would have continued to champion her son's cause, making her a persistent nuisance and a potential rallying point for anyone disaffected with Octavian's rule. Her death paved the way for Caesarion's swift and quiet removal, tidying up all loose ends. Consider the meticulousness of Octavian. He was a man who planned everything, who left nothing to chance. Is it truly plausible that he would leave the most important captive of his lifetime to the whims of a hidden snake? Or is it more likely that he would have ensured her end was secure, swift, and strategically beneficial? Some historians suggest that Roman agents, perhaps physicians or trusted servants, were instructed to administer a potent poison, perhaps through a needle or a subtle drink, designed to mimic the effects of a snake bite, leaving minimal visible trace. The idea of 2 small, almost invisible marks on her arm could easily be fabricated or attributed after the fact to support the Aspi story. The presence of 2 dead asps might also have been part of the stage scene, or a convenient discovery. Think of the sheer difficulty of a successful snakebite suicide. Asps are not always cooperative. Their venom takes time to act, and the process can be agonizing, not the swift, dignified exit Cleopatra allegedly sought. Would a queen so precise in her planning truly rely on such an unpredictable method when other, more certain poisons were available to her? Unless, of course, the poison was administered to her, and the snake was merely a prop. We also have to consider the speed of events. Cleopatra died relatively quickly after her capture, before Octavian's triumph could be fully organized. Her sudden demise perfectly served his immediate needs to consolidate power and eliminate the last symbol of resistance. The truth, as often happens in history, is shrouded in the mists of time and the victor's narrative. We may never know with absolute certainty what transpired in Cleopatra's chambers on that fateful day. Was it a defiant act of self-sacrifice, a queen choosing her destiny in the face of insurmountable odds? Or was it a silent, unseen assassination, orchestrated by a ruthless victor who understood that some rivals are more dangerous dead than alive? What we do know is that Cleopatra's death whether by her own hand or by the silent hand of Rome, served Octavian's purpose perfectly. It cleared the stage for his undisputed reign, allowed him to absorb Egypt as a Roman province, and removed the last most dazzling obstacle to his transformation from Gaius Octavius into Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The serpent's kiss, whether real or imagined, was the final dramatic punctuation mark on an epic story, ensuring that the legacy of the last pharaoh would forever be intertwined with the rise of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. A mystery perhaps, but one with a chillingly clear beneficiary. Chapter 7. Whispers of Poison. Unraveling the Roman motive. Imagine the strategic mind of Octavian, not as a conqueror wielding a sword, but as a master chess player. Each move precise, calculated, and aimed at checkmating every rival. For him, the death of Cleopatra, regardless of its precise execution, was not merely the end of a personal feud, it was a cornerstone of his burgeoning empire, a political necessity veiled in the mists of suicide. We've explored the whispers of assassination, but now, let's peel back the layers and uncover the profound Roman motives, the cold, hard reasons why Cleopatra's demise was, for Octavian, the most advantageous outcome. Have you ever considered how a single individual, even a defeated one, can embody such a potent threat to a new order? Cleopatra was more than a queen. She was a symbol. She was the last living vestige of a glorious, ancient kingdom that had dared to stand against Rome. She represented the allure of the East, its vast wealth, its exoticism, its perceived moral laxity, everything that Octavian's propaganda had meticulously portrayed as corrupting Roman virtue. To have her alive, even in chains, was to risk an unpredictable element in his meticulously planned ascent to absolute power. First, let's talk about propaganda and image control. Octavian was a genius at this. His entire rise was predicated on presenting himself as the savior of Rome, the restorer of peace and traditional values, in stark contrast to the decadent Antony and the foreign temptress Cleopatra. Imagine the Roman triumph he so desperately craved, a chained Cleopatra, magnificent even in defeat, walking through the streets of Rome. While this would have been a powerful visual of conquest, it also carried inherent risks. What if the Roman crowds, notorious for their fickle loyalties, were swayed by her legendary charisma? What if she used that moment to deliver a defiant speech, to expose Antony's love for Rome, or to rally sympathy? A living symbol, even a defeated one, can become a martyr, a rallying point. A dead one, particularly one whose death could be spun as a poetic act of despair, was far safer. It cemented her as a tragic figure, defeated by the weight of her choices, rather than a defiant prisoner who still held the power to disrupt. Second, the legitimacy of Caesarion. Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar, Caesarion, was a living, breathing challenge to Octavian's own claim as Caesar's rightful heir. Octavian's power was built on his adoption by Caesar. Caesarion, as Caesar's biological son, represented an inconvenient truth, a dangerous rival who could at any moment be used by disgruntled factions within Rome to destabilize Octavian's rule. While Octavian initially feigned leniency, allowing Cleopatra to believe Caesarion would be spared, his ultimate fate was sealed. Cleopatra's death paved the way for Caesarion's swift and quiet execution, eliminating the last direct blood heir of Julius Caesar and ensuring Octavian's unique and unchallenged position. With Cleopatra gone, Caesarion had no powerful champion to advocate for him, no mother to plot his future. His demise became inevitable, a clean sweep of the board. Third, the assimilation of Egypt. Egypt was the richest jewel in the crown of the Hellenistic world, a land of unparalleled agricultural wealth that could feed Rome for centuries. For thousands of years it had existed as a powerful, independent kingdom. Cleopatra was the embodiment of that independence. For Rome to fully absorb Egypt, to transform it into a mere province, this symbol of sovereign power had to be extinguished. Her death wasn't just about conquering a territory, it was about symbolically dismantling a rival civilization, eliminating its heart and soul. Octavian famously declared Egypt his personal domain, governing it through a prefect rather than a senatorial governor, reflecting its unique strategic importance and his desire for absolute control. Cleopatra, alive, would always be a potential magnet for Egyptian nationalist sentiment, a focal point for any resistance. Fourth, the finality of the civil wars. Rome had been torn apart by decades of brutal civil conflict, from Marius and Sulla to Pompey and Caesar, and finally to Octavian and Antony. The Republic had bled itself dry. Octavian's ultimate goal was to establish an unchallengeable peace, to become the sole, undisputed authority. Antony's defeat was crucial, but as long as Cleopatra, the exotic queen who had charmed 2 Roman titans, was alive, there remained a faint echo of that instability, a shadow of the power struggles that had defined the past. Her death, portrayed as the culmination of Antony's tragic downfall, solidified Octavian's triumph and allowed him to declare the end of the civil wars, ushering in the Pax Romana. It was a clear message to all: dissent and opposition would no longer be tolerated. Consider the pragmatic Roman approach to power. While Roman virtues were often extolled, ruthlessness was an unspoken, yet essential component of political success. Octavian was a master of this. He wasn't driven by personal vengeance or passionate hatred, but by cold, calculating political necessity. If Cleopatra's death served his strategic objectives more effectively than her capture and public humiliation, then her death would be the chosen path. The method, whether self-inflicted or assisted, became secondary to the undeniable outcome. Think of the historical pattern. Any formidable opponent to the rise of an emperor was often removed, sometimes with plausible deniability. The narrative of suicide allowed Octavian to achieve his objective without appearing overtly cruel, maintaining the image of a just and merciful ruler, even as he ruthlessly swept away all obstacles to his ultimate power. The serpent's kiss was not just a dramatic exit for a queen, it was a strategically perfect solution for an emperor in waiting. The motivations are clear, chillingly so. Cleopatra was a dangerous anomaly in Octavian's new world order. Her charisma, her intelligence, her lineage, and her son all combined to make her a continuous, albeit defeated, threat. Her elimination, strategically orchestrated to appear as a despairing final act, served to solidify Octavian's power, legitimize his claim as Caesar's heir, integrate Egypt seamlessly into the Roman Empire, and ultimately bring an end to the tumultuous era of civil wars. The whispers of poison, the theories of assassination, resonate precisely because they align so perfectly with the ultimate beneficiaries of her tragic, yet politically convenient demise. The price of defying Rome for Cleopatra was not just the loss of her kingdom, but the engineered cessation of her very existence. Chapter 8. Cleopatra's Legacy, the Queen Who Defied Oblivion. Imagine, for a final moment, the passage of 2,000 years, an eternity that has swallowed countless empires, kings, and queens. Yet the name Cleopatra still resonates, a name synonymous with power, beauty, intrigue, and tragedy. We have journeyed through her desperate gambits, witnessed the inexorable Roman shadow, endured the echoes of Actium, and unraveled the chilling motives behind her mysterious death. Now let us reflect on her enduring legacy, the profound impact of a queen who, even in defeat, managed to defy oblivion and carve an indelible mark on the tapestry of human history. Did you ever consider how a figure, so thoroughly vilified by her conquerors, could become one of history's most iconic women? The Roman narrative, meticulously crafted by Octavian's propagandists, painted Cleopatra as a depraved temptress, an oriental seductress who corrupted noble Roman generals. For centuries, this was the prevailing image, the serpent of the Nile, a figure of dangerous allure and moral decay. And yet beneath that veneer of calculated slander, her true complexity, her intelligence, her strategic brilliance, has slowly unveiled itself through time. Cleopatra's death marked a seismic shift in the ancient world. With her demise, 3 millennia of independent pharaonic rule in Egypt came to an abrupt, definitive end. The land of pyramids, of ancient gods and mystical rituals, became a mere province of the Roman Empire. Its vast wealth, its legendary granaries, its strategic position, all flowed directly into the coffers of Rome, fueling its expansion, consolidating its power, and cementing Octavian's reign. Her passing wasn't just the end of a life, it was the final, irreversible absorption of the Hellenistic East into the Roman sphere, a crucial step in the transformation of a republic into an empire. Without Cleopatra, the Roman Empire, as we know it, would not have risen with such unchallenged might. But her legacy extends far beyond the geopolitical landscape. Her story, infused with drama, love, and ultimate tragedy, has captivated artists, writers, and thinkers for centuries. From Shakespeare's poignant plays to Hollywood's grand epics, Cleopatra has been perpetually reimagined, her legend growing larger than life. She has become the archetypal femme fatale, the exotic queen, the ultimate symbol of a woman wielding power in a man's world. Think about the sheer audacity of her life. She was a woman in an age dominated by men, yet she commanded armies, negotiated with the most powerful figures of her time, and spoke numerous languages with fluency. She governed a vast, complex kingdom and understood the intricate balance of power. She was a Ptolemy, of Greek Macedonian descent, yet she embraced the ancient Egyptian religion and customs, portraying herself as the reincarnation of Isis, connecting with her people in a way no other Ptolemaic ruler had. This adaptability, this fierce determination to survive and preserve her heritage, is what truly sets her apart. We often remember her for her relationships with Caesar and Antony. But beneath the sensationalism, These were profound political alliances. She used her intelligence, her charm, and her strategic mind as instruments of statecraft, doing whatever was necessary to protect her ancient land from the relentless Roman tide. In her era, love and politics were often inextricably intertwined, and Cleopatra played that game better than anyone. Her tragedy lies not in her seductions, but in her ultimate failure to withstand the overwhelming singular force of Octavian's ambition and the sheer might of Rome. Her death, shrouded in mystery, only added to her allure. The image of the asp, the noble suicide to deny her conqueror his triumph, solidified her place in legend. It allowed her to escape the ultimate humiliation, transforming her final act into one of defiant dignity. Whether it was a choice or a carefully orchestrated event, it achieved its purpose. It robbed Octavian of his spectacle and ensured that Cleopatra's final appearance on the world stage was on her own terms, or at least on terms that served to protect her reputation from utter ruin. What can we truly learn from Cleopatra? Perhaps it is the lesson that history is often written by the victors, and that the truth can be buried under layers of propaganda and myth. It teaches us about the relentless march of empires, the clash of civilizations, and the desperate, often tragic struggles of those who stand in their way. But it also teaches us about the resilience of the human spirit, the enduring power of intelligence, and the magnetic pull of charismatic leadership, even in the face of insurmountable odds. Cleopatra's story is a profound reminder that even in defeat, some figures refuse to be forgotten. Her spirit, her defiance, her intelligence transcended the Roman attempts to erase her true nature. She reminds us that the past is a complex tapestry, woven with threads of fact, fiction, and enduring human drama. As we conclude this chapter of the unveiled past, we invite you to continue this journey of discovery with us. Explore the hidden corners of history, challenge the established narratives, and uncover the astonishing truths that lie beneath the surface of familiar stories. Because the more we understand these grand narratives and the powerful figures within them, the more we understand the forces that have shaped our own world. Don't miss our next deep dive into history's most compelling mysteries. Subscribe now to The Unveiled Past and become part of our growing community, where every episode brings you closer to the remarkable truths that time has forgotten.